She only asked for an autograph, then lost her job in front of the man she admired most. But what Keanu Reeves did next didn't just change her day, it changed her destiny. And by the time you hear what he gave her, you'll understand why the entire room was left speechless. Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. The clatter of silverware and the low hum of conversation filled the tiny roadside diner just outside Albuquerque. Denise Carter balanced a heavy tray in one hand and wiped her brow with the other, her shift already bleeding into its 9th hour. Her feet throbbed in worn sneakers, her apron strings were stained with the day's grind, and yet she kept moving, because she had no choice. Bills didn't care that she was tired. Neither did the rent notice stuck on her fridge or the phone call from her mother reminding her that her little brother needed new shoes for school. Denise had learned early that life wasn't about waiting for breaks. It was about pushing through when you didn't have any. She greeted each customer with a polite smile, even the rude ones, even the ones who barely saw her. But today felt different. As the early evening sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows through the diner's dusty windows, the bell above the door chimed, and in walked a man who seemed to bring a hush with him. Denise was clearing booth 6 when she caught a glimpse. Ball cap, worn jeans, simple black t-shirt. He walked with an easy calm, his presence understated but unmistakable. He looked up, and in that instant, her breath caught in her throat. Keanu Reeves. At first she thought it might be someone who just looked like him, but then he removed his sunglasses and nodded politely at the hostess. Those eyes, that face, no mistaking it. Denise froze for a moment, caught between awe and disbelief. She remembered sitting cross-legged in front of the TV as a kid, her late father chuckling beside her as they watched Speed, The Matrix, and later, John Wick. Keanu had always been more than just a movie star in her home. He was a reminder that quiet strength could still win. Denise steadied her nerves and approached as Keanu settled into a corner booth. His posture was relaxed, his gaze wandering thoughtfully over the laminated menu. "Good evening, sir," she said, managing to keep her voice level. "What can I get started for you?" He looked up, offering a warm but humble smile. "Just coffee, and a grilled cheese if that's okay." "Coming right up," she said, scribbling the order on her notepad, heart thumping. As she walked away, she couldn't help but glance back. Keanu sat still, observing the room without judgment, his quiet presence somehow amplifying everything else around him. She thought about saying something, but hesitated. He was just here to eat, like any other traveler. 10 minutes later, she delivered the plate and mug with a smile. "Here you go. Hope it hits the spot." "Thanks," he replied, his voice calm, kind. She nodded, turned to walk away, then stopped. Her fingers brushed the pocket of her apron, feeling the folded napkin and pen she always carried. Her chest tightened. This was the man she and her father had bonded over, the man who had unknowingly been part of her childhood memories. She spun back around. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I don't mean to intrude, but you've been an inspiration to me for a long time. My dad and I used to watch your movies together when I was little. Would it be all right if I got your autograph?" Her voice cracked at the end, emotion catching her off guard. Keanu blinked slowly, as if weighing the moment. Then, with a gentle nod, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a pen. But just before the ink touched the napkin, chaos erupted. "Denise," a voice thundered from across the diner. She stiffened. Her manager, Brian, stormed toward them, face flushed red with fury. His apron flapped behind him like a flag of war. "What the hell are you doing?" Denise stepped back instinctively. I saw it. You're harassing a guest for an autograph? In my restaurant?" Brian's voice rang across the room, heads turning, forks pausing mid-air. Keanu lowered the pen, brows furrowing. "It's all right. I didn't mind." "This isn't about what you mind," Brian snapped, cutting Keanu off without a second thought. "It's about my staff staying professional. We don't beg for autographs like starstruck groupies." Denise's cheeks burned with embarrassment. Every customer in the diner was watching. Her stomach churned. "I wasn't begging," she tried to explain. "I was just—" "Save it," Brian said, stepping closer. "You're done here." Her heart dropped. "Wait, what?" "You're fired, Denise. Go clock out." For a moment, she couldn't move. She stared at him, stunned, hoping it was a twisted joke. But Brian's face was set in stone. His tone left no room for negotiation. Keanu stood, calm but firm. "She didn't do anything wrong." Brian didn't even look at him. "With all due respect, Mr. Reeves, I run this place. And I expect my staff to behave accordingly." Denise's vision blurred. Tears of shame and disbelief welled up behind her eyes. Her hands trembled as she reached to untie her apron. "I'm sorry," she whispered, unsure if it was to Keanu, to Brian, or to herself. Keanu watched, unmoving. Then, just as Brian turned to leave, Keanu placed a folded napkin on the table, wrote something on it, and slid it gently under his coffee cup. Denise didn't see what it said, not yet. But she felt something shift, something important. As Brian stormed back into the kitchen, muttering about professionalism and boundaries, Denise quietly slipped into the back, the weight of humiliation settling into her chest like a stone. The laughter from a nearby table felt like a jab. Her dream of one kind gesture had turned into a public dismissal. She didn't even get to say goodbye. What she didn't know was that the story was only beginning. The diner's neon lights still glowed behind her, but Denise sat frozen in her car, hands still trembling on the steering wheel. The rush of embarrassment, confusion, and anger hadn't faded. Her apron was still on, her name tag askew, a napkin with nothing but a faint pen line crumpled in her pocket, the autograph that never happened. Her eyes welled with tears she refused to let fall. "Fired. Just like that," she whispered. For a moment, she didn't move. She couldn't. Her stomach churned. The smell of grease clung to her clothes. It wasn't just the job. It was the principle, the injustice of it all. She had grown up in a small Louisiana town, raised by her father, who worked 3 jobs and still made time to watch old movies with her at night. "That's a real man," he used to say, nodding at the screen whenever Keanu Reeves appeared. "Quiet, respectful, strong where it counts." She'd seen The Matrix with him a dozen times, and now Keanu Reeves had sat at her table, and she got fired for it. She finally started the car and drove home in silence, headlights cutting through the dark, past quiet storefronts and gas stations she couldn't afford to stop at. The moment she entered the apartment, her roommate Jasmine looked up from the couch. "Girl, what happened? You're home early." Denise dropped her keys on the counter and let out a laugh that was half-broken sob. "I got fired." "What? Why?" She slumped into the armchair and rubbed her temples. "I asked Keanu Reeves for an autograph." Jasmine blinked. And Brian lost it, in front of everybody. Dragged me into the office and fired me on the spot. Jasmine stood up, eyes wide with fury. "Are you serious? That man needs therapy." Denise didn't respond. The weight of humiliation pressed down hard. "I feel so stupid," she whispered. "No, honey, you feel seen. That's different." But Denise wasn't convinced. She'd spent her whole life trying not to rock the boat. One question had sunk her. The next morning came too soon. Denise woke up before her alarm, the weight of unemployment dragging her down like a wet blanket. She stared at the ceiling for a while, trying to summon energy, but her body ached from the stress. Eventually, she shuffled to the kitchen, brewed a pot of coffee, and sat at the small table by the window. Bills were stacked in a corner. Rent was due in 10 days. She knew Jasmine would help if it came to that, but Denise hated asking for help. She always had. With a deep breath, she opened her laptop and began scrolling through job boards. Server, minimum wage, late nights. Retail, must work weekends. holidays. Temp admin work, must type 70 words per minute. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, then fell away. Her heart wasn't in it. How do you explain to a new employer that you were fired for asking a Hollywood legend for an autograph? And even if she could, who would believe her? She stared at the screen until her vision blurred. Then, suddenly, her phone rang. She glanced at the number. Unknown. She almost declined it, thinking it was another scam. But something, an instinct maybe, made her answer. Hello? Is this Denise Carter? The voice was deep, gentle. Yes? Who's this? There was a brief pause. This is Keanu Reeves. Her heart stopped. She sat bolt upright, the phone nearly slipping from her hand. Wait. What? I believe we met yesterday. You served me at the diner. Denise's mind raced. Yes, oh my God, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. No need to apologize, Keanu interrupted, calm as ever. I heard what happened. It didn't sit right with me. Her breath caught in her throat. You heard? I did, he said. I'd like to meet. If you're available, lunch tomorrow? There's a quiet place in Los Feliz I go to sometimes. Noon? Denise could barely process it. Yes, I'll be there. Keanu's voice softened. Good. I'll see you then. The line went dead. She stared at the phone. Had that really just happened? Denise didn't sleep that night. Her mind ran in loops, replaying the moment over and over. Keanu Reeves calling her, inviting her to lunch, sounding kind, real. She kept checking her call log to confirm it wasn't some dream. But there it was. His number, still unknown, but forever etched in her memory. She stood in front of her tiny bedroom mirror the next morning, debating what to wear. Not too formal, not too casual. Something respectful, something that didn't scream, I'm falling apart, even though inside she was still shaking. By 11:30, she was already pacing outside the cafe in Los Feliz, a quiet spot with hanging flower baskets and a little wooden sign swaying in the breeze. She smoothed her blouse again, checked her reflection in the cafe window, then stepped inside. He was already there. Keanu sat at a corner table, wearing a plain black t-shirt, sunglasses resting on the collar, sipping coffee like any other person. When he saw her, he stood, gentle, warm. Denise, he said with a small smile, reaching out to shake her hand. She took it, trying to steady her nerves. Thank you for everything. Come, sit, let's talk, he said. They sat across from each other, and for a long moment, there was silence. Comfortable, grounding. Denise glanced around, expecting people to stare, to interrupt. But no one bothered them. It was like the world had hit pause. I wanted to hear your story, Keanu said gently, not just what happened yesterday, but who you are. Denise blinked. Who she was. No one had asked that in a long time. People usually wanted to know what she did, where she worked, what she could offer. I'm just trying, she said finally, to stay afloat, to do something more than survive. Keanu nodded. That's not just anything, that's everything. And in that moment, Denise felt something she hadn't felt in days. Seen. Not for her mistake, not for the humiliation, but for the strength it took to show up anyway. And lunch hadn't even started. Denise stood in front of her closet, heart racing, trying to decide what to wear. Every outfit felt either too casual or like she was trying too hard. It wasn't a date, not an audition, but somehow it felt like both. She finally settled on a simple blouse and dark jeans, brushing her hair back with nervous hands. Her reflection in the mirror didn't look like someone about to have lunch with Keanu Reeves. It looked like someone still trying to believe this was real. At exactly 11:58 a.m., she stepped into the cozy little cafe Keanu had mentioned. The warm aroma of fresh coffee and cinnamon pastries filled the air. Her eyes darted around the room, and there he was. Sitting in a corner booth, dressed in a dark flannel shirt and a ball cap, unmistakable even when trying not to be noticed. Keanu looked up and gave her a soft smile. "Denise?" She nodded. "Hi. I still can't believe this is happening." He stood and offered a gentle handshake. "I'm really glad you came." They sat. A waitress came by and Keanu ordered a coffee while Denise nervously asked for a tea. Once they were alone again, Keanu leaned in, elbows on the table, hands folded. "I wanted to hear more about you," he said. "Not the part where you got fired. The part before that." Denise blinked. "I mean, there's not much to say. I moved here 4 years ago. Always wanted to be close to stories, film, books, music, whatever made people feel something. I thought maybe I'd write screenplays one day or edit them, but life got in the way." Keanu nodded slowly. "Life usually does." "But you still tried." "I had to," she said, her voice quiet. "My dad and I used to watch your movies together. He loved the ones where you didn't say much, just showed up and made things right. He said, people like that mattered." Keanu gave a small chuckle. "I think your dad understood a lot." Denise sipped her tea, her hands finally steadying. She felt seen, not by a celebrity, but by someone human. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "when you asked for that autograph, you reminded me of someone from my childhood. A woman who never stopped working, never complained, never asked for help. My mother. She held us up with nothing but grit." Denise's breath caught. "Thank you. I didn't mean to make a scene." "You didn't," Keanu said. "You asked with grace, and you meant it." He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper, sliding it across the table. "I'm producing a small indie film. Nothing flashy, but heartfelt. I'd like you to join the team, behind the scenes. You'd be learning, contributing, getting your foot in the door." Denise stared at the paper, stunned. It wasn't a script. It was an invitation. Denise stared at the invitation in front of her, still trying to wrap her head around the moment. The paper felt heavier than it should have, like it carried more than just an offer. It carried possibility. After years of closed doors and sideways glances, someone wasn't just seeing her. They were opening a door wide. "Keanu?" she began, still in disbelief. "I don't even know what to say. I don't have experience. I've never been on a film set. I don't even know what half the jobs behind the scenes are called." He smiled gently, folding his hands on the table. "That's okay. None of us know everything when we start. But what I saw in you that night, grace under pressure, kindness in the middle of exhaustion, that's not something you can teach." Denise blinked, still unsure if she was dreaming. "But why me?" He paused, taking a sip of his coffee before answering. "Because you didn't ask for anything more than a moment, and even when you were humiliated, you didn't lash out. You just carried it. Quiet strength like that. It reminds me of the best people I've known." The warmth in his words made her throat tighten. "You really think I could do this?" "I do," he said simply. "And if it turns out you don't like it, that's fine too. But you deserve the chance to find out." Denise exhaled slowly, the weight of everything that had happened finally starting to shift. "What would I be doing exactly?" "We're shooting a small character-driven story," Keanu explained. "I'm one of the producers. We need someone to assist the script supervisor. That means you'll track scenes, dialogue, continuity. You'll be right in the middle of the storytelling process." It sounded perfect, like something she would have dreamed of years ago, before reality forced her into survival mode. "I don't want to be someone who just talks about what I could have done," she said softly. "I've lived too long in the what-ifs." "Then don't," Keanu replied. "Live in the what now." Their eyes met, and something shifted in Denise's chest. It wasn't just gratitude. It was hope. And hope, real hope, had been missing from her life for far too long. She picked up the invitation again, holding it gently. "I'm in," she said. "Whatever it takes, I want to learn." Keanu smiled wide. "Then welcome to the team." They stayed at the cafe a little while longer, talking about everything and nothing. Keanu asked about her favorite films, her favorite books, what kind of stories she loved to tell. Denise spoke cautiously at first, but slowly her voice grew steadier. She told him about the screenplay she started in college but never finished, about the journals tucked away in her closet, full of characters she created just to cope, about the way storytelling helped her survive grief, poverty, and disappointment. Keanu didn't interrupt, he listened. By the time the check arrived, she felt like she'd just come back from a therapy session disguised as lunch. As they stepped outside into the California sun, Keanu turned to her once more. "You don't owe me anything, Denise. This opportunity, it's not charity, it's recognition." "That's different." She nodded, her chest heavy with emotion. "I'm not gonna waste it." "I know you won't," he said. "And hey, if this gig turns out to be your first step toward something bigger, great. If it just gives you a new kind of confidence, that's good too. Either way, your story's just getting started." They shook hands, his grip warm, steady, and he handed her a small envelope. "Inside is the number for the production coordinator," he said. "She'll walk you through everything." Denise held the envelope close to her chest. As Keanu Reeves turned to go, she found herself watching the man, not the star, walk away with the same humility he'd entered with. One moment had gotten her fired, but maybe this one had just changed her life. Denise stood outside the gated studio lot, heart thudding in her chest. The sun had barely risen, casting long shadows on the asphalt, but the energy inside the compound buzzed like lightning. She adjusted the lanyard with her new badge, production assistant, script department, and clutched a notebook to her chest, like it was a life raft. A week ago, she was crying in her car after being fired in front of customers and her hero. Now she was stepping into a world she had only ever seen in behind-the-scenes interviews and movie credits. Security waved her through after checking her name, and she walked through the entrance, trying to absorb every sight at once. Trucks were being unloaded, camera tracks were being tested, and crew members hustled with focused intent. Denise blinked as someone shouted, "Quiet on set," even though nothing had officially begun filming yet. The professionalism, the pace, the sheer size of everything, it was overwhelming. She barely had time to panic when she heard her name. "Denise?" She turned to see a woman with a clipboard striding toward her. Mid-30s, sharp eyes, calm demeanor. Everything about her screamed competence. "I'm Kara, script supervisor. You'll be my right hand." Denise smiled nervously. "Nice to meet you. I'm new to all this." Kara gave a knowing grin. "That's fine. We all were once. Rule number 1, keep your eyes open. Rule number 2, ask questions. Everything else we'll figure out." They walked together to a tent just off the main set. Inside was a sea of monitors, binders, marked up scripts, and coffee cups. Kara handed Denise a packet. "Here's your continuity log. You're going to help me track scenes, props, line changes, character movement, basically making sure the film stays consistent. Sound fun?" Denise took the packet, flipping through pages of abbreviations and color-coded breakdowns. "Terrifying, actually." "Good. That means you'll pay attention." Their first scene was a small one, just 2 actors at a table. But Denise quickly realized how much work went into even the simplest moment. Every gesture, every prop, every camera angle mattered. If one fork moved between takes, someone like Kara caught it. Now, that someone also included Denise. She scribbled furiously in her notebook as they rehearsed, copying Kara's notes and creating her own shorthand. It was chaotic and exhausting, but somewhere in the middle of it all, she felt something flicker inside her, like a tiny flame. This was where stories were made. And she was in the room. By mid-morning, Denise's head was spinning with details. Scene numbers, shot angles, line adjustments. It was a constant juggling act. She accidentally logged a camera position under the wrong scene header, and Kara caught it with a quick glance. "Here," Kara said gently, tapping the correct column. "You're not just recording what you see. You're interpreting the flow. Think of it like a rhythm. You'll start to feel it." Denise nodded, biting her lip. "Sorry, I'll fix it." "No need to apologize. You're doing fine." Kara handed her a fresh pencil. No one expects perfect, just present. That encouragement carried Denise through the next few hours. She started to see patterns, how actors entered and exited scenes, how the clapperboard slate numbers lined up with the script pages. She noticed that the lead actress subtly flipped her hair every time she delivered a dramatic line, and made a mental note to track that consistency. The small things mattered more than she'd realized. At one point, she looked up from her notes and saw Keanu Reeves across the lot, deep in conversation with the director. He wasn't dressed like a star, just jeans and a plain t-shirt. But there was something magnetic about him. Not flashy, just focused. He looked her way. Their eyes met for a brief second. Keanu gave a small nod. A simple gesture, but it made Denise's spine straighten. She wasn't invisible here, she was part of something. Later, Kara pulled her aside during a coffee break. "You're picking this up fast," she said, genuinely impressed. "You've got instincts." Denise flushed. "I still feel like I'm drowning." "Good. Drowning means you're swimming in the deep end. That's where growth happens." Denise looked around the set. The cameras, the lights, the people shouting times and corrections. She remembered how she used to think movies just happened, that the magic was born in the lens. But here, behind the scenes, she saw it for what it really was. Grit, collaboration, details that no one ever saw, unless they got them wrong. There was a rhythm, just like Kara said. It was fast and relentless, but if you stayed present, it caught you and carried you forward. That afternoon, Denise faced her first real test. They were shooting a pickup shot, a short sequence that needed to match a scene filmed 2 days earlier. Everyone was pressed for time. The actress entered the set wearing a scarf, but Denise remembered suddenly that she wasn't wearing one in the original shot. Her heart raced. She checked the logs. She was right. "Wait," she called out, louder than she meant to. The crew froze. Kara looked at her, eyebrow raised. Denise swallowed hard. She didn't have the scarf in scene 12C, it'll break continuity. The silence stretched. Then Kara smiled. "Good catch." The assistant director gave a thumbs up. "Reset the wardrobe, take it from the top." The crew quickly adjusted. The actress handed the scarf off to a wardrobe assistant without missing a beat. Within minutes, they were rolling again. Denise stood frozen, pulse pounding. Had she overstepped? Had she just embarrassed herself in front of the entire team? But then Keanu appeared beside her, quietly, calmly. "I heard you saved the shot," he said. She looked up, startled. I just remembered the scene. I didn't want it to mess up the edit." He smiled, not a big flashy smile, just one of approval, gratitude. "That's the kind of attention to detail that makes the whole thing work. You've got good eyes." And guts. Denise exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. "Thank you. That means a lot. You belong here, Denise. Keep going." Then he walked off, back into the organized chaos of the set. Just like that. But his words stayed with her like a spark that ignited something deep inside her. By the end of the day, Denise was physically exhausted but emotionally charged. Kara patted her on the back before they packed up. "Not bad for your first day. Seriously, you handled yourself like a pro." Denise offered a tired smile. "I feel like I survived a storm." "You did," Kara said with a grin. "And you didn't just survive, you showed up." Walking to her car that night, Denise looked up at the stars peeking out above the city. The same sky she had stared into countless nights before, wondering if she would ever find her place in the world. And now, finally, something felt different. She had shown up. She had been seen. And for the first time since she moved to LA, she wasn't just waiting tables or chasing shadows. She was learning, growing, contributing, all because of a napkin, a question, and a moment of courage. She slipped into her driver's seat, pulled her phone from her bag, and typed a message to her roommate. "First day on set. Hard. Amazing. Can't wait to do it again." Then she looked out the windshield, engine off, hands still. There was so much more ahead. But tonight, just for tonight, She allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she was finally where she was meant to be. The sun barely peeked over the city skyline as Denise adjusted her headset and reviewed the call sheet for the day. It was the start of week 2, and everything still felt surreal. Just days ago, she'd been pouring coffee into chipped mugs and dodging her manager's glare at the diner. Now she was part of a film crew, working under Keanu Reeves, someone who had not only inspired her growing up, but who'd seen something in her when she thought no one else did. She stood on the edge of the set, clipboard in hand, watching actors rehearse blocking. Every word, every movement was being recorded, analyzed, preserved. Denise took meticulous notes, double-checking continuity, noting any dialogue shifts, and even jotting down how props were held, where cups were placed. Details she'd never noticed while watching movies before now jumped out at her like neon signs. And oddly enough, the skills she'd honed at the diner were starting to shine here. Her memory, sharpened from recalling dozens of orders at a time, helped her track scene-by-scene changes with uncanny precision. Her ability to multitask, juggling 6 tables, refilling coffee, cleaning spills, and still offering a smile, now helped her keep calm when 3 departments barked for updates at once. Even her natural ability to read people, forged through years of dealing with every type of customer imaginable, allowed her to anticipate what the director or script supervisor might need before they asked. Kara, the head script supervisor, had taken notice. "You've got good instincts," she told Denise after a long take. "Most people miss that prop continuity thing on their first run, but you saw it immediately." Denise had blushed, her smile stretching wider than she intended. "I used to have to remember who got lemon pie and who got it warmed. That kind of sticks with you." Kara laughed. "Well, whatever it is, it's working. Keep doing it." By midweek, Denise no longer felt like the wide-eyed newbie. Crew members waved to her in passing. One of the production assistants asked her to help label a script update packet, something they'd normally reserve for more experienced staff. Even the cinematographer, an intense man named Arlo, gave her a nod of approval after she flagged a scene reset that was off by a single beat. But through it all, Denise kept one thing private: Keanu's role in this. He never mentioned it, never treated her like a charity case, never hovered or drew attention to the fact that he'd brought her onto the project. To everyone else, she was just another crew member earning her spot. And that was exactly how she wanted it. Even during moments where their eyes met across the set, or when he gave her a quick smile of acknowledgement, it was never performative. It was quiet respect. That meant everything. By Friday evening, Denise sank into a folding chair near the craft services table, feet aching, fingers smudged with ink and script notes. But for the first time in a long time, she felt like she belonged. Denise was starting to feel a rhythm she hadn't felt in years, not since college, when she'd pulled all-nighters editing screenplays that only her professors ever read. Back then, she had hope. She used to believe in her ideas. But reality, the bills, the rent, her dad's passing, had a way of squeezing that belief out of her. Now, on set, something was returning. A version of herself she thought she'd buried under late-night diner shifts and customer complaints. It wasn't just that she was working. It was that she was contributing. People asked her questions, listened to her answers, trusted her judgment. One morning, Kara handed her a fresh scene draft. "I want you to double-check this against yesterday's setup notes. I'm pretty sure we moved that flower vase." Denise flipped through her own scribbles, eyes scanning rapidly. "Yeah, we moved it from the window to the counter, right after the lighting changed." Kara grinned. "Exactly, I knew you'd remember." Every compliment, every little task she handled, it all added up. Confidence didn't return in a single lightning bolt. It came in slow, steady steps. A warm nod from the gaffer, a post-it thank you from the assistant director, a shared lunch with the makeup artist who asked, "How do you get started in this?" But even then, Denise never said Keanu's name. Not out of shame, but out of respect. This wasn't about being discovered. It wasn't about a celebrity swooping in and handing her a dream. Keanu had opened a door, yes, but she'd walked through it herself. She wanted everyone to see her for her work, not her backstory. And Keanu seemed to understand that perfectly. He rarely lingered around her, but when he did pass by, his words were short and warm. "Nice call yesterday on the bracelet change," or "That note you gave Kara helped catch a reset." He was like the wind at her back, quiet, unseen by most, but moving her forward all the same. That Friday, after a particularly long scene involving multiple cuts and tricky dialogue shifts, the director clapped his hands and called for wrap. The crew whooped and applauded, slapping each other's backs. Denise stood in the corner, smiling to herself. Kara walked over and bumped her gently with an elbow. "You made it through week 1. Denise laughed. "Barely." "Barely," Kara scoffed. "You've done better than most interns I've had in years. Keep this up and I might lose my job to you." Denise blushed. "I doubt that." "You'd be surprised." Kara paused, lowering her voice slightly. "You've got a good eye, Denise, but more than that, you give a damn. That matters." Those words stuck with her long after she left set that night. She didn't have a title or a film credit or a single guarantee this would lead anywhere. But for the first time in a long time, she believed it might. That weekend, Denise did something she hadn't done in a long time. She took a walk without checking her bank account first. She wandered into a used bookstore on Melrose, letting her fingers trail across old hardcovers, movie memoirs, dusty scripts with handwritten notes in the margins. She picked up a second-hand journal, leather-bound, worn. She bought it with cash and wrote one sentence on the first page. "I am no longer waiting tables. I am building stories." Back home, she collapsed on her futon, the ache in her feet familiar, but it was a different kind of exhaustion now. It wasn't survival. It was momentum. Her body was tired, but her spirit was humming. She flipped through the pages of script notes she'd taken all week, cross-referencing scene continuity, highlighting props, jotting questions she wanted to ask Kara on Monday. Her handwriting was neater now, more confident. As she read, Maya Angelou's words came to her mind, words her father had taped above her childhood desk. "Nothing will work unless you do." She whispered them aloud. Monday would come quickly. There would be more takes, more rewrites, more late-night call sheets. But Denise wasn't scared of any of it. She was ready. She remembered something Keanu had said at lunch, not directly to her, but in passing, almost like a thought spoken aloud. The smallest roles change the biggest scenes. Back then, she hadn't fully understood what he meant. Now she did. Because while she wasn't in front of the camera and her name wouldn't be in the opening credits, she mattered. Her work mattered. Her story was slowly becoming part of something larger than herself. As the week ended, she texted her roommate. "Denise, first full week done. I'm exhausted." Roommate, "Still feeling good?" Denise, "Better than good. I feel..." She paused before sending it, then smiled and hit send. The final day of filming arrived like the closing of a treasured book, bittersweet, full of reflections. The sun had just started rising, casting golden streaks over the lot as Denise walked onto set with her clipboard tucked under one arm and her headphones looped around her neck. She had learned so much over these past few weeks, and though she was still technically the assistant to the script supervisor, her responsibilities had quietly grown. She greeted the crew like family. Kara gave her a quick wink as she passed, mouthing "last day" with a mixture of joy and disbelief. Denise smiled back, but her chest felt tight. She'd finally found her rhythm here, her place, and now, just like that, it was about to be over. She busied herself through the morning scenes, double-checking line logs and monitoring continuity, while actors rehearsed quietly behind the monitors. The usual buzz of a shoot day hummed around her, but Denise's focus was unshakable. Every time she looked up and saw the cameras, the lights, the buzz of collaboration, it reminded her this wasn't a dream. This was her real life now. Around midday, when the director called for a short break before the final sequence, Denise stepped aside near the catering tent to sip on lukewarm coffee. She was wiping her hands with a napkin when she heard a familiar voice behind her. "Denise." She turned around quickly, and there stood Keanu Reeves, calm, grounded, wearing the same subtle expression he always carried on set. He motioned gently for her to walk with him. They strolled past the trailers, toward a quieter stretch near the edge of the lot, where equipment trucks were parked. The wind stirred softly, kicking up little flutters of dust. "I wanted to thank you," Keanu said, his voice thoughtful, "for the work you've done and the way you've done it." Denise tried to speak, but the lump in her throat stopped her. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a plain white envelope. "This is for you," he said, extending it. "Not just for your time here, but for your future." Her hands shook slightly as she took it. She hesitated before opening it, almost afraid of what might be inside. When she finally peeled back the flap, her breath caught. Inside was a handwritten letter, and tucked behind it, a check. Denise's eyes welled with tears before she even read a word. The check alone was enough to leave her speechless. Far more than she had earned in her weeks on set. It wasn't just generous, it was life-altering. But it was the letter that made her heart stutter. "Denise, most people don't realize how hard it is to hold yourself together when everything is pushing you to fall apart. I watched you show up every single day, focused, humble, eager to learn. That's rare. This check is not a gift. It's a bet on your future, a bet on your voice. Use it for your dream. Just promise me you won't stop. Keanu?" Her fingers trembled as she clutched the page, trying to breathe. All her doubts, the late nights, the exhaustion, the humiliation of being fired, suddenly felt like stepping stones instead of barriers. Keanu Reeves, a man she had admired since childhood, had seen through all of it. Not her mistakes, not her job title, but her strength, her will. She looked up at him, speechless. "Thank you," she finally whispered, voice cracking. I don't even know what to say." "You don't need to," Keanu replied gently. "Just don't waste it. I see a storyteller in you." Denise couldn't hold back anymore. She reached out and hugged him. Not out of celebrity awe, but out of raw human gratitude. He didn't hesitate. He hugged her back with a kind, fatherly warmth, then stepped back with a smile. "There's a moment," he said, gesturing around them, "where you leave the old version of yourself behind and you step into something bigger. This is one of those moments." Denise nodded, still fighting the tears. "I won't let you down." "You won't," Keanu said matter-of-factly, "because this wasn't about me. It was about you finally seeing what you're capable of." They stood there for a moment in silence, the noise of the set distant now, like another world. And for the first time in years, Denise felt not just hope, but belief. Not just in a future, but in herself. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Denise helped wrap up the final scenes, stacked chairs, rolled cables, and said quiet goodbyes to the crew that had become like family. But her mind kept returning to that envelope, now tucked safely in her bag. A passport to a future she once thought impossible. That night, alone in her apartment, she sat on the floor with the letter in her lap. The check remained untouched, not because she was afraid to use it, but because she wanted to do it right. She lit a small candle and opened her journal, the same one she had scribbled dreams into long before she ever came to LA. On the first blank page, she wrote, "I promise I won't stop." Then she underlined it twice. With tears still fresh on her cheeks, Denise opened her laptop and searched for two things: a local screenwriting program and a new blank document. She had stories to tell now, her own, others, and it was finally time to begin. Keanu had opened a door. She was ready to walk through it. Denise sat at her tiny kitchen table, the envelope from Keanu still resting in front of her like a beacon from another world. The check had already cleared, and the letter of recommendation was tucked safely into her desk drawer, but the emotional weight of his gift lingered. It wasn't just about the money. It was about what it represented: faith, belief, and a second chance. A door had been cracked open, and it was up to her to walk through it. For weeks, she had browsed screenwriting programs, unsure if she could really do it. The fear that she wasn't good enough gnawed at her, imposter syndrome wrapped in old memories of rejection. But Keanu's words echoed in her mind. Just promise me you won't stop. So one chilly Monday morning, Denise walked into the admissions office of a local film academy in Los Angeles. The school wasn't the most prestigious, but it was reputable and filled with passionate, scrappy storytellers, people like her. She handed over the tuition check with a trembling hand, half expecting the staff to laugh her out of the office. Instead, the woman behind the desk smiled, stamped the paperwork, and said, "Welcome to the program." That afternoon, she texted Kara a photo of her new student ID. Kara responded instantly. "Yes, you did it, future Oscar winner." The first day of class brought Denise back to a world she hadn't inhabited in years. Notebooks, pens, half-empty coffee cups. She was surrounded by people younger than her. Film nerds quoting Tarantino and Spike Lee, tossing around screenplay jargon like pros. But Denise had something they didn't have: life experience. The sting of being fired, the hope that bloomed from an unexpected kindness, and most importantly, a story. When the instructor asked everyone to introduce themselves, she simply said, "I'm Denise Carter. I used to be a waitress. Now, I'm learning how to write stories that matter." Her classmates nodded, some smiling, but one girl whispered, "That's badass." As weeks passed, she dove into writing with a fire she hadn't felt since she was a teenager, journaling stories under the covers at night. For her final class project, she began writing a short screenplay inspired by her late father. A story about a daughter who loses her way, only to be reminded of her worth by a stranger. It was raw, it was personal, and it was terrifying to write. But she didn't stop. Every evening, after classes ended and the streets of Los Angeles quieted down, Denise returned to that tiny table, lit a small lamp, and pulled out her laptop. There, under the soft hum of traffic and distant sirens, her screenplay slowly took shape. It was titled The Last Cup of Coffee, a simple name that held layers of memory. In the script, a woman named Dana worked the night shift at a rundown diner. She met a man who changed everything with a single act of kindness, a character never named, but shaped by quiet strength and humility. Their brief interaction unraveled Dana's guarded exterior and awakened long-buried hope. The story mirrored her real life, but it also honored the deeper truths of grief, perseverance, and unexpected redemption. Writing it wasn't easy. Denise wrestled with every scene, trying to get the emotions just right. She'd read lines aloud to herself, rewrite entire sections, then delete them and start over. Her professor, a stern but fair industry veteran, called her in one day after reviewing the second draft. "Denise," he said, adjusting his glasses, "this story, it hits you in the gut. It's simple but honest. You're not writing to impress, you're writing to feel." That sentence stuck with her. By the time she submitted the final version, she didn't expect praise or recognition. She simply felt proud. For the first time in years, she'd followed through on something that mattered to her. Not because it promised security or approval, but because it told the truth. On a whim, she submitted it to the Pacific West Film Festival, a local event that celebrated independent screenwriters and first-time filmmakers. She knew the odds, hundreds of entries, limited slots, but sending it in felt like sending a message to her younger self. You didn't give up. Weeks passed. She waited, half hoping, half dreading. She checked her inbox each morning with a racing heart and a growing sense of doubt. Did she really belong in this world of storytellers? Was her voice strong enough to matter? Then, one Thursday evening, just as she was washing dishes and humming an old Marvin Gaye tune, her phone buzzed with a new email. The subject line read, "Congratulations, official selection, Pacific West Film Festival." She stood frozen for a moment. Then, as the realization sank in, she dropped the sponge in the sink, covered her mouth with both hands, and let out a choked laugh. She'd made it. Not all the way, not to fame or fortune, but to a place where her voice was heard. Denise sank onto her couch, staring at the email with wide, tear-filled eyes. All the nights she'd doubted herself, all the times she told herself she wasn't good enough. It all washed away with those simple words, official selection. She immediately texted Kara and her old professor. Then, after a long pause, she messaged the one person who had made all of it possible. To Keanu Reeves. Subject, thank you. Dear Keanu, you told me not to stop, so I didn't. And now, my story is going to be seen. It's about my dad, about the diner, about that moment everything changed. Thank you for seeing me before I saw my Denise. That night she stood at her window, looking out at the glowing skyline of Los Angeles. The city hadn't changed, but she had. The dream wasn't just a dream anymore. It had a name, a beginning, and now, an audience. She whispered into the night, "Dad, I hope you're watching." And in her heart, she imagined him smiling back, sitting in his favorite armchair, mouthing the words she once heard him say after every Keanu movie they watched together. That guy's got heart. Now it was her turn, and her story had only just begun. The evening air buzzed with excitement as Denise stepped out of the car, her heels clicking against the sidewalk outside the historic Los Angeles Theater. Marquee lights blinked above her, announcing the finalists of the local film festival. She swallowed hard, clutching the small envelope in her hand. The official invitation she had triple-checked a dozen times. It still didn't feel real. The crowd around her shimmered with nervous energy. Filmmakers, critics, hopeful students, and seasoned veterans all gathered under one roof, their stories stitched into scripts and projected onto the silver screen. Denise took a breath and stepped inside. She had come alone, though not by choice. Her roommate had to work a late shift and her mom couldn't fly in from Mississippi. But as she walked through the lobby, all she could think about was her dad, the man who first taught her to love stories, who sat beside her on a worn couch as they watched Keanu Reeves in old action movies, never realizing how much those quiet nights would shape her future. The lights dimmed, the audience hushed. Denise's name appeared on the screen as the title card of her short film rolled, The Booth by the Window. The story of a waitress, a late-night diner, and a promise between a daughter and her father. Scene by scene, she watched the audience react. Gasps, sniffles, the kind of silent attention only great storytelling earns. She couldn't hear her heartbeat anymore. It had been replaced by something else, the pulse of being truly seen. When the film ended, the applause was loud. Denise sat frozen. The host returned to the stage, clearing his throat with a smile. And now, the winner of this year's Best Original Screenplay? She gripped the sides of her seat. Denise Carter for The Booth by the Window. The room erupted. Denise rose slowly, as if gravity had shifted. People around her clapped, nodded, congratulated her. She climbed the steps toward the stage, her heart thundering. She turned to the crowd, blinking back tears under the spotlight. And there, in the back row, stood Keanu Reeves. Silent, smiling, proud. Denise stood on stage, clutching the glass trophy in both hands. It wasn't heavy, but it felt like it carried the weight of every sleepless night, every setback, every no she had ever endured. She stepped up to the microphone, the warm stage lights softening the sea of faces before her. And yet, her eyes kept returning to the back row. To him, Keanu's presence grounded her, calm, unassuming, but full of quiet encouragement. She took a breath and leaned forward. "I didn't expect this," she began, her voice slightly shaky. "But more than that, I didn't expect the path that led me here." A few murmurs rippled through the audience. "I used to work the night shift at a diner," she continued. "Some of you probably know what that's like. Plates, customers, shoes that hurt, smiles you force. It was hard. And one night I made the mistake of asking a customer for an autograph." The crowd chuckled softly, unsure of where the story was going. I got fired on the spot. Silence. But that man, he didn't walk away. He didn't turn his back. He saw me. She paused, glancing at Keanu again. And that moment changed everything. Not because of the fame, but because someone believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. A few sniffles could be heard. Denise smiled through her own welling tears. This story, this film I wrote, it's about second chances. It's about how the smallest gesture, a note, a smile, a moment of kindness, can shift someone's entire world. She raised the award slightly. So, I accept this on behalf of every person who's been overlooked, underestimated, or told to stay in their place. And to the man in the back row, thank you. The room erupted again, this time louder, more emotional. Denise stepped back from the mic, blinking through tears. She descended the stage slowly, trophy in hand, heart still pounding. As she reached the floor, Keanu stepped forward from the shadows. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Two people who had crossed paths by chance and reshaped each other's journeys. Denise smiled. I wouldn't be here without you. Keanu shook his head gently. You did this. I just gave you a nudge. They stepped aside as the next winner was announced, slipping into a quiet hallway just beyond the glowing stage lights. Denise held her trophy tightly, like it might vanish if she loosened her grip. Keanu walked beside her in silence, hands in his pockets, his posture relaxed, but his eyes filled with something deeper. Pride. Do you remember that napkin? Denise asked, her voice softer now. He nodded slowly. Hard to forget. I kept it, she smiled, framed it. Every time I doubted myself, I'd look at it and remember what you said. Use this for your dream. That napkin meant more than money or opportunity. It was belief. It reminded me that I mattered. Keanu looked at her for a long moment. That belief was already inside you, he said. You just needed someone to remind you where to look. They paused near the exit, where a few guests filtered out, unaware of the quiet reunion happening just a few feet away. Denise turned to face him directly. You changed my life, Keanu, she said, eyes glistening. And I plan to do the same for someone else. He smiled, warm and steady. Good. That's how it works. One person lifts another. That's the real legacy. She exhaled, her shoulders dropping, not from exhaustion, but from release, the kind that comes after carrying a weight for too long and finally realizing it's no longer there. I want to write more stories, she said. Stories about people like me, people who think they're invisible until someone truly sees them. Keanu extended his hand. Then, promise me one thing. She tilted her head. Don't ever stop. Denise clasped his hand with both of hers, nodding. I won't. As he disappeared into the crowd, she looked down at the award in her hands. The lights from the lobby caught the engraved lettering, Best Original Screenplay, Denise Carter. But it wasn't just the title that mattered. It was the journey, the fight, the kindness of a stranger, and the fire it lit in her spirit. She stepped back into the evening air, the city buzzing around her, and smiled toward the stars. This wasn't the end. This was just her first act. Denise sat at her desk in the modest writer's room of a rising indie production studio tucked into the hills outside Los Angeles. There was no sign above the building, no red carpet, just a row of parked hatchbacks and a faint hum of creativity vibrating through the hallways. On the door to her shared office was a small handwritten sign, Writer's Nest, Enter with Plot Twists. She smiled at the joke every time she passed it, but today her smile lingered longer, because taped next to it, just beneath the peeling paint, was a new note from her showrunner congratulating her on the ratings bump from her latest episode. That script had her name at the top. No assistant title, no contributor. It was hers. Her desk was cluttered with notes, outlines, and coffee mugs. But right above her monitor was the one thing she never let collect dust. The note. The note. The original, folded piece of diner paper that Keanu Reeves had handed her after the worst night of her life. The one that ended her job, but began her story. It now sat framed in glass, preserved like a sacred artifact. You've got something rare, heart, grit, presence. Use this for your dream. Just promise me you won't stop. Those words had carried her when doubt tried to crawl back in. They'd lit the path forward when film school deadlines piled up and money ran low. They reminded her that someone had seen her when the world tried to erase her. And now here she was, a working screenwriter, not just someone who dreamed of stories, but someone who told them and got paid to do it. Her phone buzzed gently with a reminder, mentorship Zoom at 11 a.m. She smiled again. This one wasn't for her. It was for a program she'd helped launch, Write Forward, a small initiative for young writers from working-class backgrounds. One of them, a high school student from Detroit named Jasmine, had just finished her first short script. Denise clicked into the mentorship session just as Jasmine's eager face filled the screen. She was seated in what looked like a small bedroom, a poster of the Matrix on the wall behind her. "Miss Denise," Jasmine beamed, her voice brimming with excitement. "I finished the rewrite you suggested. I even added the dream sequence." Denise's eyes lit up. "I can't wait to read it. How did it feel this time around?" "Like I wasn't scared anymore," Jasmine said. "Like, maybe I can really do this." Those words hit Denise in the chest like a memory. She used to feel that same way. Unsure, trembling, afraid of her own ambition. The difference now? Someone had believed in her when she hadn't known how to believe in herself. "You can absolutely do this," Denise said gently. "But it's not just about talent, it's about persistence. You keep showing up and the doors start opening." Jasmine nodded, her smile softening. "Thank you for helping me believe it." When the call ended, Denise sat back in her chair. The framed note above her monitor seemed to glow in the mid-morning sun. She reached up and gently tapped the glass. "Still paying it forward," she whispered. There was a quiet knock at the office door. It was Malik, another junior writer on the team. "Hey, you good to do the pitch meeting in 10? "Yeah," Denise said, rising with confidence. "Let's get it." As they walked toward the conference room, Malik asked casually, "Hey, random question. How'd you get started anyway?" Denise paused for a second, then smiled. "Someone once saw something in me, before I saw it in myself." Later that evening, Denise stayed behind while most of the staff trickled out. The quiet hum of the office gave her space to think. She stood by the window, watching the city below blur into golden trails of headlights and neon reflections. Her laptop pinged with a new email from a festival organizer in Chicago. She opened it slowly. Another small production had requested to adapt her original screenplay into a short film. She smiled, her fingers tracing the edge of her keyboard. It still startled her sometimes, how far she'd come from the girl fired for simply admiring her hero, and how far she still wanted to go. She turned toward the wall above her desk. Framed in silver trim, Keanu's handwritten note still sat in perfect view. "You reminded me of someone who raised me with quiet strength. Use this to chase your dream. But promise me, don't stop." A gentle ache stirred in her chest. That promise had carried her through sleepless nights, long days, and moments when quitting would have been easy. She walked over, opened the drawer, and pulled out a blank note card. On it, she wrote, "To the next dreamer. Someone once gave me a reason to keep going. Let this be yours." Then she slid it into an envelope along with a small donation check. Tomorrow she'd give it to one of the interns who reminded her of herself. Because beginnings like hers weren't meant to stop, they were meant to multiply. The city was still. Early morning light washed the Los Angeles skyline in gold as Denise stood quietly on the rooftop of her apartment building. Her hands rested on the rusted railing. Below, the hum of a waking world stirred. Cars, dogs, joggers, life. But up here, it was quiet enough to think. In her hands, she held a small, weathered envelope. The corners had curled slightly and the ink had faded. It was the same note Keanu had left under his coffee cup. The same note she'd kept in a frame above her desk. Today, though, she brought it outside, just to remind herself how far she'd come. She read the words again, even though she knew them by heart. Sometimes, we don't see our own light until someone reflects it back to us. You have that light. Keep going. Keanu's voice echoed in her memory, but it wasn't the fame or the gesture she thought about now. It was the simplicity, the sincerity, the kindness of a man who didn't owe her anything, but still chose to give her everything she needed in a single moment: belief. A soft breeze tugged at her curls as she lifted her head to the rising sun. Sometimes it only takes one moment to change a life. Not because someone is famous, but because they're kind. That moment didn't just change her job or her week. It redefined her future. Because someone had seen her when she felt invisible. And now it was her turn to see others. Denise stepped back inside her apartment, the note still in hand. Her living room had transformed over the last year, not in size or furniture, but in spirit. Bookshelves now lined the wall, filled with screenwriting manuals, festival programs, and printed drafts of her own stories. On her desk, a corkboard displayed index cards and pinned feedback from her latest writers group session. But in the center, just above her laptop screen, was that same note, framed, untouched, a constant reminder. She sat down and opened her journal. The page already had a date written across the top, and beneath it, a single sentence: kindness doesn't require an audience. Denise thought of all the people who had quietly shaped her journey. Her father, who filled their living room with stories and westerns. Kara, who showed her the ropes on set without ever making her feel small. Even her roommate, who covered rent that one extra week when Denise couldn't make ends meet. And of course, Keanu, who didn't swoop in like a hero, but walked beside her like a friend, who listened, who didn't try to fix her, but gave her space to rise. It struck her that the most profound acts of kindness often go unnoticed by the world. No cameras, no headlines, just one person seeing another clearly. She looked out the window again as the sun fully crested the skyline. This city hadn't changed, but she had. This was an incredible story, but more than that, it was a true one. It shows what happens when someone sees you not for who you are now, but for who you could become. If you believe kindness can change everything, share this incredible story and tell us, has a stranger ever changed your life? Because maybe your story, like Denise's, is just beginning. Later that evening, Denise found herself standing on the balcony of a small writer's studio where a handful of indie creators were gathering for a final script reading. Laughter echoed through the room behind her. Young storytellers sharing dreams over plastic cups of sparkling cider and half-eaten trays of catered pasta. She could hear their excitement, their hunger, their hope. She leaned against the railing, sipping a lukewarm coffee, staring out over the glowing horizon of Los Angeles. The city lights shimmered beneath the dusk sky like 1,000 unwritten stories waiting to be told. In her pocket, she still carried a folded photo from the festival. The moment she stepped off stage, cheeks wet with tears, and found Keanu standing in the back row, clapping for her like the proud friend he had quietly become. No interviews, no fanfare, just a man who kept a promise. "I never thought I'd get here," she whispered to the skyline. But she had. Denise thought about the note again, not just the words, but the weight they carried. Sometimes it only takes one moment to change a life, not because someone is famous, but because they're kind. It was never about celebrity. It was about humanity. And because one man chose compassion over indifference, she now stood with purpose in a city that had once swallowed her whole. Back inside the studio, a young girl approached her, holding a printed script nervously in her hands. She looked barely 20, eyes wide with uncertainty. "Hey," she said, "everyone says you're the one to ask. Do you think this story's worth anything?" Denise smiled and took the pages gently from her. "Let's find out together." And just like that, she paid it forward. One moment at a time. If this incredible story moved you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it. Inspire someone. You never know whose life it might change. Has a stranger ever changed your life in an unexpected way? Tell us in the comments. Let their kindness live on through your words. Because one moment, one act, one voice can start everything.